Well, over the past few weeks, we've seen multiple assassination attempts on President Trump's life, a deep state coup that removed President Biden from power, a massive banking outage that I guess Americans totally forgot about. Remember that day when you couldn't go get money out of your banks? Banks closing across the United States? I'm sure it's nothing to really worry about. What the hell is happening in America right now? It's like we're sleepwalking through a disaster. Someone who knows all too well how the deep state permanent government operates is General Mike Flynn, and we're thrilled to have him here on Redacted. General, great to see you. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Yeah, Clayton, thank you so much. Thanks for all that you're doing, and to your audience. I know you got a great, loyal audience, and I want your audience to understand that, boy, if they have one place to look for, just some very authentic reporting is to you, because I look at clips of you all the time. I know you and I have not so yet, but will come back on for maybe a longer, an hour or so. But yeah, I want people in this country to understand that this is it. We are at the end of a very thin thread of an experiment in democracy called a constitutional republic that, frankly, our founders wrote about. There's I think it's 89 Federalist Papers. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I read them all, but I've read many of them. And I've studied our history. I've studied world history. I've been at the top levels of the intelligence community, to include the director of national intelligence level. I was the assistant director and running one of the largest intel agencies in the world, the Defense Intelligence Agency, as well as serving as the most senior intelligence officer in the Department of Defense, the entire Department of Defense. And for a very brief time, was the national security advisor to the United States of America, under President Donald J. Trump, where I was fully read into the entire nuclear code program. Everybody always talks about the football. I mean, I sat there with Trump and went through that whole thing. So I have, a lot of depth of knowledge and insight into the kinds of enemies and opponents that we are facing around the world, and have studied enough of what we are up against globally. And now for the last probably, really, I could take you back 50 years. I won't, bore your audience here today, but maybe another time we'll come back and talk in more detail. But certainly for the last couple of presidents, not counting Trump, I think Trump was an anomaly. In fact, it is an anomaly, and still is, that we have been being transitioned and transformed, like the word that Barack Obama used, fundamentally, into a socialist system of government, where the federal government has really taken over much more authority, taken on the reins of power, even over the legislative branch, and clearly over the judicial branch. And that taking over of those two elements, they started in earnest in the 90s under the Clinton administration. I'm talking about the judicial branch now, with many judges. And then the legislative branch is one of the most compromised components of the federal government. And again, that really has been going on for quite a while. I mean, there's examples all the way back to certainly the Eisenhower days when he was president, and then progressively moving through the decades. But it wasn't as fully transitioned or transformed back then. It was sort of under development. But certainly from the 90s and then clearly under the Obama administration, they literally took over and ensured that people that were in Congress, and I'm talking about both sides, not just the Democrats, but the Republicans, to ensure that there was a sufficient number that were compromised, and I'm talking about seriously compromised, either through money or behavior, to where they were owned. That's why we don't see the current Congress, which is dominated by the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, not not totally dominated, but certainly they have the majority in the House. They've done nothing. And you have to ask yourself, why isn't Speaker Johnson, why didn't McCarthy, why didn't they do anything when they were in power? That's because they are controlled by other people that the American people should be highly upset about. And so, there's specific things there, but in general, it's kind of like, what do we do about it? Because we can listen to Donald Trump all day long at his rallies and hear all the problems that we have, and everybody understands all the problems about illegals and a lousy economy and our woke military, which I could spend all day talking to you about that,
Right.
or the foreign policy failures that we have overseas in the Middle East. Our retreat from Afghanistan, the abysmal situation in Iraq, where we spent close to $20 trillion, okay, in Afghanistan and Iraq, with a T, 20, okay, in both those theaters of war, and never mind what's happening in Eastern Europe, where if you listen to Vladimir Putin the other night when he because now there's attacks going from Ukraine into Russia, and the consequences of those are going to exacerbate a problem that should have been solved really a couple of years ago, if not back in the late 2014 timeframe. So while Obama was president, and I want to remind your audience that Russia attacked Ukraine during February of 2014, almost 2 to 3 days immediately following the Sochi Olympics. So it wasn't under Trump, it wasn't under Biden. Actually, it was when Obama was the president, is when they initially attacked Ukraine. They stopped. Everything was on hold while Trump came in. And then when the election was stolen from him in 2020, which is a whole other issue, then Biden came in, which he's totally controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and China. And all of the nonsense about Ukraine that we generally know about, especially with his son Biden or Hunter working for the Burisma crowd, and which is essentially a criminal cartel, and Joe is fully involved and fully aware. I mean, I'm trying to just make sure that your audience understands the breadth, the scale, and the scope of everything that we're facing, and I really haven't even brought it home yet, right? I mean, it's not a border problem anymore that we have here domestically. We have illegals everywhere in our country, and I mean everywhere, in every major city, and they're now starting to move out into the rural areas of the country. I just finished a film tour around the country where we went to 33 cities. We touched 40 states. We drove 18,000 miles, and we did it in about 55 days. And one of the things that I specifically chose was towns and small cities to go and show my film. And I wanted to be able to get out to the grassroots of America to do that. And because I wanted to speak to people. And that's the third time that I've been around the country in the last 4 years. And I'm telling you, the sentiment of the American people is that they are scared to death. They're frightened at what is happening in our country. And whether I was in Rapid City, South Dakota, or Bow, Washington, or Ronkonkoma, New York, or small town up in Pennsylvania, or a small town in Connecticut, or we were out in Nebraska, Wichita, Kansas, every single place, I'd always ask them, how was the illegal problem and how was the fentanyl problem in their towns and in their little parishes and little cities. And every single place was a disaster. I mean, an absolute disaster. Illegals everywhere. Because we're talking about numbers that are like, we've heard numbers as high as 20 million. But let's just say it's 10 to 12 million. Those numbers, they equate to about like 30 of our states combined. I mean, I'm from the state of Rhode Island originally. I'm talking to you from Florida right now, but my state of Rhode Island is a million people. So you're talking about, 12 times the state of Rhode Island in terms of population for, that's lowballing it, for the illegal problem in this country. And then the illegals, when they come in, we now are, the United States of America is now the number one child sex and child slave trafficking market in the entirety of the world. Number one, child sex, child slave trafficking, and our Department of Homeland Security, this is in testimony, in House testimony, lost 85,000 children that came across the border illegally. I mean, how does our government do that, right? And then people feel like that, they want to work for the government. I mean, this is insane. And so all these things that I'm telling you, are factual. They are well known for those that are paying attention. I've lowballed in purpose. I'm on kind of my soapbox here, Clayton. I'll pause there. Whatever direction you want to take, but I do appreciate you allowing me to come on and speak a little bit.
No, I mean, I think it's incredibly important, and that's why I haven't said a word, because I don't want to. I think it's important for our country to hear somebody who's been literally in the belly of the beast, who's, at the highest levels of our government, watching the corrosion happen. I mean, no one is better equipped to speak on this, in America than you. I'm not going to say a word. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. So when I hear this, and you paint this picture,
I was listening to a. Yeah, go ahead. I was going to
say, I think we have a little bit of a delay here, but I was going to say, you paint this unbelievable picture. We've been piecing all of these things together here on the show for the past couple of years, whether it's the fentanyl crisis, the illegal sex trafficking in the United States, the largest purveyor of child sex trafficking in the world is the United States government, to the stolen ballots, all of these pieces, and you have an America sitting there right now wondering, who is in control of this country, General? I mean, we had a deep state coup that unfolded just a few weeks ago, and Americans are, I think, just sort of sleepwalking through their day right now. And I really believe we saw a coup unfold, and maybe you can correct me if you think I'm wrong on that. But who do you think is running the White House right now? Who do you think is running this country?
So let me take your audience back a little bit, because that was only one phase of the coup. Okay. So the plan was to have Barack Obama 8 years as the president, and they were able to pull that off. And then the next 8 years was going to be Hillary Clinton, right? Hillary Clinton is completely owned by those, and I'll address exactly who's in charge here in a second. So that was the plan. 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary, and the United States of America would be a socialist country by now. And we would, as I've said very publicly before, we would probably be called the United Socialist States of America at this stage. And what happened was Donald Trump got in the way. Donald Trump decided in summer of 2015 to run for president. And so he did. Fast forward. The first phase of that was to steal the election and make sure that Hillary Clinton won. Well, they didn't take it. They didn't go far enough, okay? There was actually, most people don't know, there was actually the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin were challenged by the Clinton campaign after Trump was elected, okay? And that was done within the first probably 72 hours. I was in the room, and Trump said, "Be my guest, audit the whole thing if you want." And they came back and they quietly said, "We looked at these states," and it ended up where Trump ended up with like a couple of 100,000 more votes once they did that audit, all done quietly, because they did try to fight that initially. But once Trump was fully in charge of the transition, then they knew there's no way in the world. And now this is Obama, under the Obama administration. Obama's still in the White House. Then they knew they had to do something different, because there was no way in the world that they were going to allow Donald Trump to have a successful presidency while he was the president. That wasn't the plan. And so now they kicked things into full gear, high gear under Obama, right? This is while Obama is still in the White House in the late part of 2016, early 2017. A meeting that occurred on the 5th of January, 2017. It came out in the dismissal of my case and the evidence that we fought for, as well as was touched on in the Durham report. In that meeting, 5 January 2017, in the Oval Office was Barack Obama, Joe Biden, John Brennan, Jim Clapper, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, and Jim Comey. Okay, that was the people that were in that meeting. And we know exactly who was in there. We know exactly what was talked about because it came out in evidence in my case. And parts of it came out in the Durham report. So there's no, oh, he's making this stuff up. People look it up. So that was the initial phase of the coup to basically get back in power and get rid of Trump. Okay. The second big phase in terms of chunks was the 2020 election. There was no way in the world that they were going to allow Donald Trump to win the 2020 election. But the planning for that did not start on 2020 or didn't start in November of 2020 or even 45 days prior using mail-in ballots. It started with COVID. So the introduction to COVID. COVID was actually discussed back in the early 2000s. Actually, it was discussed during the time frame of the Bush administration, even though the Bushies really didn't know much about it, and it didn't have to play into there. But the 2015 timeframe, it clearly came back in, and they started to talk about the introduction of a bioweapon, a bio attack into the United States of America to be able to do different things, right? And so COVID was introduced in the late 2019 timeframe, where if you really go and you dig, you can see elements of it talked about in December because the World Games were being played out in China in October and November of 2019. And then in December of 2020, you started to hear little elements of some media reports that came out. And then all of a sudden, January, February, boom, we got hit COVID, right? So then you had the COVID introduction, and the whole purpose of COVID was to make sure that the 2020 election was in the bag, okay? And once they did that, the real part of COVID, the introduction of COVID, of this bioweapon by China, was to ensure that we could change our election system and process, okay? And a lot of examples about states that use mail-in ballots. Once, like Oregon, as an example, started using mail-in ballots in late 1990s, and they've never been anything but hardcore liberal progressives since then. So they knew that what the impact of mail-in ballots would be, and of course, ballot harvesting, but principally mail-in ballots. So damn near everybody went, okay, can't have people going to the polls, and we're going to introduce mail-in ballots. And so many people, to include Bill Barr, the Attorney General for Trump in June timeframe, June 2020, said mail-in ballots are filled with fraud. Everybody knew it. Everybody knows it. Filled with fraud. So 2020 comes along. Boom. 2020 is one of the most, dishonorable elections that we've ever had in the nation's history, because for anybody to think that there wasn't fraud involved, and not one Republican governor has ever stood up and said maybe there was just a little bit of fraud in 2020, because they all can't stand Trump. None of them. I'm talking about every governor, and every one of them has had anti-Trump, statements or whatever. And I'm talking about Republicans, never mind the Democrats. So now we're here. Okay, so that was 2020. Now we're here in 2024, less than 90 days before the next major election, and we just experienced an internal coup. So these are phases that I'm talking about. So the next phase is, and it's not the final phase, because we're getting ready to go into another one here. The next phase was we got to get rid of Biden. I mean, think about it. Joe Biden was put at Camp David for, I think, 4 or 5 days prior to that debate to rest and to prepare for that debate. There's no way in the world. In fact, what they did was they screwed Joe Biden. He came into that debate totally unprepared, not rested, and like he was well past his bedtime and got crushed in that debate. That gave them the immediate excuse to introduce, the next candidate, right? Kamala Harris. So out goes Joe. That's an internal coup. That's probably the third or fourth phase of this thing to make sure that they stay in power. And now you got Kamala Harris. Now, here we are. So Kamala Harris, and they're going to tout her being, she's ahead in a lot of the polls right now, which is just crazy. And I do think that the Trump campaign, Trump has, I don't know whether it's the people around him. I think that his messaging has been off. I listened to some of the conversation between he and Elon the other night, and I'm a big fan of Trump. I mean, believe me. And I stay in touch with him, not that much, but I'm a guy that's, I'm not a bullshitter. I'm going to be matter of fact. Here's what we're facing. And I'm all for Trump, and I'm going to go out there and like I've been doing around this country to get people to understand that, Donald Trump right now is our savior. If we don't get him in office, we're going to become a communist country here damn near overnight. So we got the Democrat convention coming up, and we're going to see some very, very interesting dynamics. I am not 100% certain that Kamala is going to come out the other end and still be the nominee for the Democrat Party, because these people don't be surprised by any of them. So who's in charge? Who's running the show? Well, you have the World Economic Forum, okay? And you can go dig into all these people. Klaus Schwab is the sort of the CEO of that. You've got George Soros. You've got Barack Obama internal to the United States of America. So those other two are external. They're part of this globalist alliance. You have Xi out of China, who is he's holding a lot of reins over people here in this country, to include those in the White House. And you have Barack Obama, right? And Barack Obama, and who is Barack Obama? What is Barack Obama's background? Who's controlling Barack Obama? Because Barack Obama is not somebody who is, wakes up every morning and he's in charge of everything. Barack Obama is somebody who is dangled by this other sort of global alliance that does exist. And that global alliance, and I wrote a few notes down, because what we're going to experience between now and the election that are outside of our control, meaning the United States of America, unless we have a president, and Joe Biden is still the president. I call him a sundowner because he's only awake from 8 o'clock to probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then when the sun goes down, he goes to bed. So I call him a sundowner president. So, so these are the people that are this alliance of people that are in charge, and they stay in communications with each other. They actually, in many cases, are very public about what their plans are and what they're doing. In fact, the closest advisor to Klaus Schwab recently said that we don't really even need to have a U.S. election, that artificial intelligence can predict the outcome of the election, can predict the outcome of what the American people want. Well, then, these are people. The closest advisor, his name is Harari, to Klaus Schwab and George Soros, and he's very close to Barack Obama as well. So we're going to still have our election, but as this guy also says, Harari now, he also says this will probably be the last election in the United States of America, the last presidential election in the United States of America. It's like, I kind of go, what? Where is this coming from? Why does this guy believe this? And these are the people that's part of this alliance. And when I say alliance, I'm not talking about China, Russia, Iran, and those countries exist, and they are also part of a nation-state alliance that is against the United States of America. So, so what does all this mean? Well, between now and November, we're likely to experience a complete global economic shift to a digital currency that Biden has already signed off on almost 3 years ago. People can go look up the executive order 14067. It's on central bank digital currencies. That is that we are already in play here. You've heard these guys talking about it. Even Trump talked about digital. He talked about not allowing it, but he's not in charge, right? So Trump, I know, has talked about Bitcoin and some of these other, cyber currencies. But this digital currency is something that the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus 25 other nations that are now aligned with them, which represent about 85% of the world's population. So this is a conversation that's going on right now, and they meet this October for a summit, and that summit is going to be chaired by, Vladimir Putin, who's totally pissed off at the world right now because of the Western world, NATO particularly, because of what they are now doing to try to start a nuclear war in Eastern Europe. One, the economy, a global economic shift that we don't really have any control over. And what will it shift from? It'll shift away from the U.S. dollar as the currency of choice for global trade, what we call the petrodollar, which began basically back in the early 1970s, 1973 to be specific, and it'll shift more to a gold-backed currency. So you use your currency, whether it's the ruble, the dollar, the yuan, and you're going to have to back it by gold, not necessarily by oil, which is what has always been backed by. The second thing that we are likely to face is another bio attack. The World Health Organization has already come out and talked about I think it's H5N6 is where we're at now. The swine flu, the bird flu. So they've already talked about that. Monkeypox is another one. And these are actually more deadly than this, advanced flu that the COVID was, right? Which was a Chinese introduced bio attack, okay? Just like fentanyl was introduced by China, which is a weapon system. So, this monkeypox, this H5N6, this other bio attack, World Health Organization has already come out and said, that we are potentially, and I think we may see something this week, maybe next week, about a declared global a health emergency. The third thing that is likely to happen, and this now the Middle East and the wars against Israel, and I'm 100% behind Israel because you've never heard of an Israeli Jew cutting the head off of a Christian, right? I mean, I'm so sick of these people that are these pro-Palestinian people in our country and around the world that are like against the Jews or against Israel. Give me a break. And sorry, folks, but that's the way it is. So this is the third component of what could happen in the next 90 days that we cannot control. And what we can't control in the Middle East is the real potential that Iran escalates the war against Israel by coordinating and converging with all of their capabilities, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi rebels, and Iran at the same time against Israel, to basically try to, like the leadership of Iran has said, to try to take try to wipe the state of Israel off the map. Okay, Israel as a piece of geography will never go away. The state of Israel as a nation state could be wiped off the face of the earth with the ordinance that those entities that I just outlined have, meaning Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, with missile ordnance and rocket ordnance that they have. They have an abundance, more than the Iron Dome of Israel could handle. And the Israelis know it. And frankly, these guys know it because they're not certain about what the U.S. may or may not, how we might support Israel or how we might retaliate. And I'm telling you, our military right now is woke, sad. I'm sorry to say that. Not our rank and file. And I want to make sure I state that. Not our rank and file, but our leadership. And I'm afraid that we are in a position right now where if that happens and the Chinese decide to do something out in the Pacific, like try to take Taiwan, or Russia decides we've had enough of this bullshit and we're going to now attack fully into Ukraine with different types of weapon systems. I mean, this is all right now, Clayton, playing out as I sit here talking to you. None of what I'm saying is conspiracy theory or theoretical, okay? This is all very real. These are the players that are in play. And when I look inside of the United States of America and I think about the American people, who I love, I love the what's in our DNA, which is freedom. And I know that there's a lot of Americans out there like saying, not over my dead body, are we going to lose this country? Well, I'm just telling you, folks, if the primaries, and these are the Republican primaries mainly, if the primaries are an example of the complacency of the American people that are conservatives who are registered to vote, the primaries in the United States of America to date in this year's primary, which is the most consequential set of elections we've ever had, we are less than 35% turnout. Okay? Of registered voters who could vote, we're less than 35% turnout. In some states, it's less than 30. I was in Nebraska, I was in Nebraska not too long ago, and their turnout for their primaries was 27%. So
wow.
When people come to me and go, oh, we got to do something, we got to do more, and all this stuff on social media and all the outcrying and all the people that show up to rallies for Trump, the tens of thousands of people, and you get inspired by the numbers of people that show up to these rallies. It's like, well, why aren't they turning out to vote? They're not. And so if everybody's going, well, I'm going to wait until the general election to vote. Well, guess what? That means we have a lot of people who are going to win in the House and the Senate and some of the down ballot voting that are not America First people. We are going to have a lot of never Trumpers. Okay. I mean, the House of Representatives, I worked very hard with a couple of groups of people, but actually two nonprofits, very hard for the 2022 elections to win the House of Representatives. And I feel with the teams that we had in 9 states, we worked our tails off, and I feel pretty good. I feel strong enough to say we were part of why we were able to take the House of Representatives in 2022. But we only took it by a very small margin, and we've seen some of the people quit, right? Some of the Republicans quit, and we've seen the House under McCarthy and now under Johnson do absolutely nothing. We have Peter Navarro, who went to prison. Thank God he's out now. Steve Bannon, who I consider a friend, he's in prison now up in Danbury, Connecticut, and he's purposely taken out during this time so Trump couldn't reach back out to a guy who's a warrior who actually helped Trump win in 2016. I was standing there right next to him every single day while we fought tooth and nail to get Trump elected in 2016, and we did. And that's the kind of warriors that he needs right now by his side, because I'm afraid that, as I hear it from everybody, and I hope that Trump hears this, that he needs to know that there are a lot of people around this country that desperately want him to win. And I mean, I'm talking about Democrats. As a former Democrat, I speak to a lot of them, and they want him to win, even though it's like they're not going to say nothing. Maybe they'll go vote. I don't know. But they're all concerned about, the kinds of things that are swirling around President Trump, meaning the kinds of things that he talks about, the things that he's projecting. I mean, what he needs to be talking about is exactly what he plans on doing going back into the White House. Number one, he's got to make sure that he looks at government reform and government accountability, period. That's number one. Number two, he's got to be talking about the economy. He's already proven that he can strengthen the economy because economically he's brilliant and he knows exactly how to do that again. Number three, he has got to solve the international and foreign policy deficit of leadership that the United States of America currently has. He has got to do that. That means day one, if he gets back in, pray to God that he does, he's got to stand up and say, America is back in charge. And now, folks, you're going to have to deal with me. And I like the fact that there's a level of uncertainty that comes with Trump, right? Because one of the, you have 9 principles of war. And one of the principles, I think it's the most important principle, is surprise. And with surprise comes the idea of uncertainty. And to have a president of the United States who's smart, but gives a modicum of uncertainty to other people around the world, that's a good thing, I believe. So those are just a couple of items that he's going to have to. Never mind the border. He's already talked about what he's going to do with the largest deportation effort in the world. Hey, you know what? He better have a good plan for it instead of just going, we're going to put a couple of guys in charge. We're going to, hey, we have 900,000 law enforcement professionals in this country, 900,000 at the state and local level. And I'm going to tell you, we have so much crime that's got to be dealt with. And if we start this deportation effort, he better plan on bringing in the active duty military in order to do it, because we just don't have the ass to do it. Our law enforcement has got to be given the reins to be able to go take care of the problems on their streets and in the homes and protect the citizens of this country. And we got to do this other stuff. So, this doesn't just happen because you say it. And I don't, I want to see it. This is me now, and you got me on a roll, and I'm well past my time here, Clayton. I apologize, but I want people to understand we have got to do things to fix this country. And I want people. My last comment, I'll shut up. Trump is one person for a short period of time. In this case, if he wins, if we have an election and he wins, 4 years, we have far more than 4 years of work to do, folks, and we have probably a decade or two if we think we're ever going to return to a normalcy and get rid of a lot of these communists that are in our government. We have communists in our government; they have been there for many, many decades, and now the Chinese, the Chinese have so infiltrated the institutions of power and the institutions of civility in our country. Education is one, as an example. The corporate world is another. Those are two outside of the government, as well as the government, and I'm very concerned about all of it. So there you have it, Clayton.
I mean, I'll get you out of here on this, General, which is President Biden just gave an interview where he said he didn't think that the election, the transfer of power, he said Kamala Harris needs to win the presidency, otherwise there won't be a peaceful transfer of power. I'll get you out of here on that, General. Do you think that the United States is headed for sort of a rift, a major sort of civil war, in President Biden's own words, a non-peaceful transfer of power unless Kamala wins?
Yeah. When I heard him say that, I was like, okay, because I analyze everything. I mean, that's just part of my brain. And I look at scenarios, as an intelligence professional from the day I came into the Army, thinking about things. You look at things in terms of options and scenarios and what might your enemy do, right? Worst case, best case, most likely case, kinds of things, situations. And when I heard him say that, I was like, these son of a bitches are going to plan something. So it's not the conservative mega base Christian, which is the largest segment of this country, that are going to do anything. If God help us, God willing, Trump is able to win this election, if we have an election, then I believe that this progressive left, what he is projecting with that statement is that they will plan something that will not allow for a peaceful transition of power. Now, is that going to be done by the theft of the House of Representatives? Okay, so what people have to think about are the different options that they have. They're in power right now. They're in charge. I mean, he's the president. Biden's the president. Why would he say that? Why would he set the conditions for anything but a peaceful transition of power? I mean, Barack Obama. There is a video of Barack Obama sitting with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, like 3 or 4 days after Trump won in 2016, where Barack Obama says, we're going to have a great transition. We're planning on turning over everything, just blah, blah, blah. It's just going to be a wonderful, rosy transition to Donald Trump. And those are my words, but those are essentially the theme of what Barack Obama said in November of 2016. Go find it, folks. And I'm going to tell you, it was anything but. It was like we were at war during the transition. And as we faced while Trump was in office, and this is what these people are projecting that they are planning on doing. So I want us to have a fair election. I want it to be done properly. I want it to be done normally. And once it's done, may the best, in this case, man and woman, whoever, win. I mean, I want Donald Trump to win because I fear that we will become a communist country. I really believe that, and it'll happen very quickly. And we will never return. We will never return to being a constitutional republic. That's the weight that I feel is on my shoulders, and that is the weight on the shoulders of every freedom-loving American on the planet here, and certainly in the United States of America. And that's what I believe. So I just, I want people to understand we're not in a politics as usual like some of these rhinos believe. Our policies are better. They want big government, they want little government, they want less taxes, more taxes. We're past that. This is about two competing ideologies right now: Americanism and being a constitutional republic, or being a progressive socialist system of government and really falling under the reins of communism. That's what we're looking at. And I can't say it any more clearly.
General Mike Flynn, it's been an eye-opening experience, and I hope people will rewind this, watch this, go back, bookmark this. What you just said, there's so many incredible things that I want to do a deeper dive on with you. So I hope you'll be able to come back, General. I hope we can do a deeper dive on a lot of these different subjects. But we are in really a tenuous moment right now in the United States, and I really appreciate you being here, General. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and my best to Natali. Thanks, Clayton.